They head for Africa, the last adventure for the family, where the boys finish school, but not before they're sent off to remote lakes and game parks to man up a bit among lions and grunting buffaloes.
Chapter 10. Great White Hunters, or maybe not. Ted went to Zambia ahead of us in early 1964. We flew on a VC-10 jet with BOAC and were collected at Ndola Airport by his new Batman. It was always a surprise for us to discover what kind of car Ted would buy when we arrived at a new location. Singapore had yielded a Peugeot 403, which for some odd reason he'd shipped from our posting before, which was Germany. Or was it England? Anyway, he sold it. "It'll be a Land Rover," Sean offered, hopefully. "Might be a Jag," Michael tossed in. But Ted could never get himself to buy a new car. He was not a mechanical man. A to B is what's important. A to B, he always said. Anyway, we usually ended up with something strange. This time, it was a monstrous modified Ford Zephyr of questionable origin, with a different colored hood. So, in this blue Zephyr 6, we arrived at our 20th house. A black fellow appeared at the porch. Our mouths opened. We'd never seen an actual black man close up. Grinning like a grand piano, he carried our bags inside. "This is Pencil, our home helper," announced Ted. I could only try and imagine what his wife and children might be called, but I discovered that names of everyday items were quite often bestowed upon Africans. Screwdriver was a common one, torch another, and for the girls, Beauty was popular. "You must treat Pencil with respect, boys." "Respect," Ted ordered. Pencil was a very courteous fellow dressed in cast-off European clothes. I'd imagined my first African to be decked out in an ostrich feather headdress, carrying an assegai and sporting a leopard skin. Poor old Pencil with his long black beard, eager to please, carrying, fetching. I felt awkward with him doing this, as I was used to carrying my own stuff around. Whenever we arrived at a new place, we had temporary army issue and at first slept on military-style beds on rough grey blankets with a red stripe down one side. As I finally crept into my bed, I could hear the night sounds, crickets chirping away, a kind of silence, a warmth about the place. I wondered what it was like outside and lay imagining lions, elephants, and all manner of wild beasts prowling about. What was in store? Quite a lot. The Dowling brothers 3 arrived late for school on day 1 of summer term at Kansenji High, Ndola. It was the 14th and penultimate school I was ever to attend. On that first morning assembly, Headmaster Noel F. Rowe was in no mood to tolerate our being 5 minutes late. The whole school sat in silence as he addressed them, and us lot, out of uniform, hair down to shoulders, just barged in, waltzed down the aisle, and looked for a place to sit. I have to say that Rowe ruled the roost behind high moral ground, coining in quaint words that education makes a people easy to lead, but difficult to drive, easy to govern, but impossible to enslave. It follows, therefore, that we were uneducated because he instantly drove us from morning assembly to get a haircut. Short back and sides was the norm for school, but for us in 1964 it was out of the question, as there was no mention of how the front of the head should look. We adopted a style that we retained for a decade, a sweeping thatch of blonde hair covering our eyes and half of nose, but thrust back with a swish any time a lekker maisie passed by, which for the uninitiated approximately means nice bit of crumpet. We returned the next day clad in the statutory greys and blues and a yard of hair with which to peer through. Without so much as an aptitude test, I was relegated to the famous Sea Stream, where I met Dave and Barry, a pair who will remain in my memory for eternity. Barry is in mine and Sean's life to this day. Teachers dreaded our arrival and had an unwritten law to keep us separate. Dave had a sister, Sue, who resembled Mick Jagger. I recall his family lived in a block of flats down near the river, a place I contracted bilharzia, which is an insidious little snail that creeps into your bloodstream and makes you lazy. On reflection, maybe it wasn't bilharzia after all. "Your piss'll turn red and you'll die," Dave observed. "Yeah, but how do you know I've got it?" I said. "The doctor'll stick a big pair of scissors up your arse and snip off a piece of intestine," he replied. I'd rather have died. I just took the pills and sloped about half asleep. Nobody noticed. School started at 7 in the morning and finished at 1 in the afternoon, so the rest of the day had me and these two reprobates escaping into the bush. At one end of town, the beautiful Concola 18-hole golf course was a favorite playground for us. At the last hole, a monstrous fig tree skirted the green, and Dave decided to try out a trick he'd learned. He squatted over the hole and curled a turd into it. We climbed the tree and waited. A group of golfers arrived at the green, and from our vantage point we'll never forget the look on the face of the first one to hole out. He proudly dipped his hand and recoiled in horror. Dave fell out of the tree and had to run for his life. There were some nasty things lurking, not the least malaria. It seemed all the Africans had the malady, and we eventually had a bout. Dave, Barry, me and Sean went camping once, and I managed to get something really nasty. We had the most disgusting campsite imaginable, our clothes scattered about on trees to dry. It was always raining on that trip. We took our pellet guns and got so bored we had a pellet gun fight. The rules of engagement disallowed directly shooting at each other above the neck. After a great leap and roll from behind a tree, Barry managed a shot at me. I still have a scar on my ankle from that. One morning after a breakfast of open-baked bean cans left in the fire to heat, I noticed a lump on my backside. It had been getting bigger every day until it was ready to burst. "Take your pants off," said Barry. Sean was lurking behind as I lay down and craned back to see this great red mound blossoming on my bum. A major operation was organized. I lay on my stomach as Barry examined me. Give him credit. He did heat the pin first, then stuck it right into the boil and rummaged around until 2 fat maggots popped out. "Great," he said. "We've got some bait now." They were putsy fly. Another horrible, nasty thing you get if your clothes aren't ironed. Ironed? There. Lucky if we didn't manage to wear our underpants less than 8 ways around. Inside out, back to front, upside down. The fly lays its eggs on wet clothes when they're hung out to dry, and they burrow into you when you wear them. The holidays lasted an age. It was my parents' nightmare, so we used to just head off and find something to do. Anything to get us out of the house. There was no TV, no electronic games or computers. Rides to anywhere was totally out of the question. We had to walk or hitchhike everywhere, and in those times, just getting into town was a 1-hour walk. Therefore, there were no barriers to distract us from running wild.